No, I'm kidding. Welcome. Thank you. Come on, y'all. What's up, Inflection?
Yeah, bring the energy.
How are y'all feeling? Awesome. Well, my name is Bea Arthur, and I am a licensed mental health counselor, and Bea Arthur is my real name, so get used to it. And the reason I'm excited about this is because a lot of people, when they think about mental health, they think about problems, and it makes them sad. But what people don't know is that mental health is really about solutions. So we like to see you on the other side of the problem. We know that there is an other side of the problem. And when you enter something as brutal as the startup journey, there's a very extreme emotional aspect to your entrepreneurial journey, and for some reason it's very isolating. You know, your investors don't want to hear that shit, and you definitely don't want to tell your employees because you have to keep morale high. So it can be a very intense experience for any high performance people. So that's why we're excited to have all these founders up here attacking the problem in different ways. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Normally I would let you go first, but I'm a feminist, so ladies first. Laura, and also Laura's my homegirl, so go ahead, girl.
I'm Lori Cheek, the founder and CEO of a Bluetooth mobile dating app called Cheeked. And if it works the way if everyone in this room had the app, hint, hint, it's free in the iTunes store, you'd make connections with everyone in here. So that's my gig for 8 years now.
And Lori and I we're also Shark Tank sisters. And we also got our super embarrassed, but stayed in it, so. Alexa.
Hey everyone, I'm Alexa Meyer. I'm the CEO and founder of Orchid. We're launching the first gym for the mind. So basically, if you think about a fitness center, we're creating a parallel experience but for your mind and mental health, where people can come in, try therapy, access group workshops, and do self-workouts in the form of just like quiet space and tea. I started this out of personal frustration about a year ago. I was a VP at a tech startup. Walking home from work, I was super anxious, stressed out. I'm like, I just want to drop into a space and talk to somebody, and that isn't available, and so that's what we're creating.
No, you're good. Yeah, I spoke to you guys a little bit earlier. Devin Baptiste, the founder of Groupraise, or one of the co-founders. I am a person who needs help mentally. I think like a lot of people do. I think I mentioned to Frank, I recently lost 75 pounds. Thanks. And that was a whole journey alongside of, some of the hardest times in the company. And so trying to think about how to take care of my body and to think long term while I'm also, working in a high growth environment. And I think there was a lot, like, I always say, like, if I could have just pushed a button to lose the 75 pounds instead of actually having to do it, I would have pushed it. But I think the actual process of going through that, and I'm still on that journey. I'm still moving forward in a journey for health, both mentally and physically and intellectually. Happy to share any of that process and be vulnerable, and I definitely don't have all the answers too. So,
Well, just following up on that, because you see this a lot, our personal priorities are the first things that go usually when you're building a company. Usually it's like your relationships suffer, your health suffers. As a startup founder, things go wrong 80% of the time, so it's really hard. But we know for progress, you have to have discipline and consistency. So how did you do it when you have a business to run and you had to eat wet spinach every day?
it was nasty, to be honest. I mean, so it was like very, very, very not pretty in the beginning. So so the mechanism was first, I just looked for the worst offending thing in my life, which was sugar. Sugar is wonderful, but I miss it. But so I stopped having sugary beverages 5 days a week. So I didn't even do the weekends. I could do whatever I wanted to, and I lost 30 pounds. Like just cutting out like just being like sugar. But I went through like physical withdrawals. I went through. It was like getting off crack. It was pretty horrible. But I think so. And so pretty much I was just walking around with, I guess, 30 pounds of sugar in my body, which is pretty crazy to think about. And then the next part of the curve was adding in exercise and then a larger fundamental change into my diet. And so that part of the curve was also just really ugly to get started. Because I told myself I didn't have time as a founder. I was like, when do I have time? Like I have kids. I have 2 kids. I've got my wife. I've got now 50 employees. I'm like, what the fuck do I have time to, sorry, to do that? And that was like and I had obviously tried to lose weight in the past, and but I was looking at my life and I saw that I was only getting busier. Like, it wasn't like, there was no like, yeah, it was like, okay, well, if you can't figure it out now, you're definitely not going to figure it out in like 2 years, like, or some other time in the future. And so I had to like beat a lot of lies. I told myself that I didn't have time, and what I really found is that I didn't have the priority, right? And that was like, and so I started waking up at 5 a.m. And that was like I had to set like 7 alarms, and the first time I missed it, and I like felt really bad about it. But my whole commitment was like, this is going to be the input, and we're just going to like, I don't know if it's going to work, and I may fail again, like I failed before in the past, but I'm just going to do this thing. And I think I wish I knew that like actually that was the hardest. Like the first 3 weeks of that, this whole journey has never been as hard as getting started. Like that was what I thought was just the beginning, and I was like, man, if it is this hard, I don't think I can do it. That was actually the moment of the most difficulty, and ever since then, the things have gotten like easier. No, not easy, but like it wasn't as challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this journey, you have to have a short vision and a really long memory, because our bodies, just by nature, are really resistant to change. And, there's whenever there's uncertainty or inconvenience, that's when we get anxiety, right? And so anxiety is really excessive focus on something that might happen in the future, and depression is actually excessive focus on something that is happening or has happened. So it's a journey, right? And so you really have to have your mind right. And so, I mean, Alexa, we talk about this a lot, about therapy being an ongoing experience. People like to, I'll just meditate, or I'll just self-medicate, but it has to be an ongoing thing so that you can have long-term change. What's been your biggest mindset hack?
So for me, therapy's been a journey from when I was like 21, but it's been an on and off again kind of experience, often due to insurance plans being all over the place, not having an accessible place. I've moved around a lot. So I'm Canadian, moved to San Francisco. Now I'm in New York, and I really, really value the personal experience of mental health and therapy, so teletherapy was never an option for me. But a year ago is when I started seeing a therapist that practiced something called cognitive behavioral therapy. And what that really is at a high level, it's kind of the idea that your thoughts inform your feelings, which inform your actions. And we all have agency over our thoughts, and we can reframe those thoughts. So if we have negative thoughts about a thing, or we're interpreting an external situation in a certain way, we can slow down our minds to reframe that so that we don't end up feeling so negative. And when I learned that, it was like unlocking a treasure chest. It was super, super powerful. And so I still see that same CBT therapist, but I also can practice these things on an ongoing basis. When I'm feeling stressed out, when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm negatively interpreting somebody saying something to me in a way that I'm like, oh, or do they not like me? I'm like over-personalizing that. I can slow down and then control my reaction, which has been incredibly helpful.
Very useful. What about you, Lori? I know you're into both, like fitness and mental.
Yeah, so when I launched my business, I guess that was over 8 years ago, I became more stressed than I'd ever been in my life. If I hadn't found my relief in the gym, I think I probably would have turned to crack. But I started setting up camp.
I was on sugar.
I started setting up camp at the gym. So I'd go there and work in the morning in the lobby, and then I'd pop in and take a class and come back out. For 8 years, I've been doing that, and it's really changed the way that I am able to cope with the levels of hell and back over 10 times that I've been. So I just think it's been the most crucial element of me building my business of anything.
Yeah, and just back to it, just because you have been at it for a while and you are committed, and when you're in the journey, sometimes you sacrifice things. How do you have the stamina for it?
I mean, I think I've gotten so much stronger. Like, I say I could be the poster child for the age-old phrase, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. And, I mean, I really have been through every obstacle that I could write the book on it. And I just feel like I've turned to yoga. I used to hate yoga. I used to hate spinning. I mean, I was into cardio and all sorts of exercises, but now I've adapted to everything. And I think there is a level of meditation that I find at the gym. Like, I'll get on an elliptical trainer at a minimum for an hour every day, and I get my social media done there. I read articles there. So I'm actually working. I don't use the the hand part of the elliptical, but I do get work done on the fitness equipment. So I don't know. I'm multitasking, and it's good for your mind and adrenaline and all sorts of things.
For me too, it's been a journey of experimentation. So like, I don't believe that there's a one size fits all mental health prescription. So yoga might work for you, it might not work for you, it might not work for you, it might work for me. So I just started experimenting. In addition to seeing the CBT therapist, I also didn't work out, or I didn't have a physical fitness regimen. I was just like running away from the gym, and that's how I got my workout. I was like, I don't want to go there. But I was just like, I know I need to do something, because me not being physically active, I could tell it was making me lethargic and negative and moody. And so I just started, ClassPass was great for that, because I just tried a bunch of different stuff, and then I found something that worked for me and kept me going back. Community was a big part of it, though, because I know that I'm a very social person, and so the incentive of going to a group class and knowing I'm going to see other humans there, there's going to be that accountability, someone's telling me what to do, so I don't have to think about like running on a treadmill for more than 2 minutes, was super, super helpful. So encourage everyone that's like on their mental health journey is just try a bunch of different stuff and see what works for you. And it's the same thing with diet as well.
That's exactly what I found. So for me, I was boxing. So in boxing, we had a community element. I do it with a trainer, with a group, and it was also like I found a place where there were pros in my gym. So I felt like I was doing the same level of input. So it wasn't just kind of like me, by myself. Like I needed that identity of like that I could become excellent at something, because it's I guess professionally it's what drives me, and so it took a lot of experimentation to find like I hate running on a treadmill. I just can't stand it. And then when I found like, oh, this is a community activity, doing something that I really enjoyed, it allowed me to like be like, I get to box, like I get to experience this. And I think what you were saying, Lori, about like what doesn't kill you make you stronger, and there's a book called Anti-Fragile, which is like a really, really great book if you haven't checked it out. And the like core thesis is that actually like exposure to pain or challenge responds with increased capacity, and this happens in lots of different areas and aspects. And I think that was one of the things that was one of what I thought before. Like I thought I was tired, I didn't have time, and do these things. But actually going through this process gave me a capacity that I didn't even know existed. And so in the beginning, I was using my old capacity, but in the end, I had way more energy to be a dad. I had way more energy to be a CEO. I have way more energy to do these things from this task. And so it was one of those things that like I experienced, and I was like, like this is what they mean, right? Like when you do this, and I think the example is like if you go to the gym and you bench press and your max is 150 pounds, your body will allow you to do that, but when it recovers, it doesn't just allow you to get back to 150. It like recovers to 160, right? And so you get an increased capacity as you expose yourself to pain. And I think I've always been skeptical of pain as a mechanism to grow, like proactively. Like it's always happened to me, but then kind of getting into a regiment of like where that was predictable, and saying like, okay, like I'm gonna go, and this is actually a really healthy type of pain. Like being in the gym and exposing myself to this gives discipline, and it gives this kind of pain, and that pain has yielded excess capacity. And so it was just one of those things that like I had heard about, but then I got a totally new experience of. And I think, so experimentation, I think, is a really great point, too.
I kind of have an anecdote and then a question for you, too. One of the therapists that we work with at our gym just was working with a client who was just experiencing symptoms of depression, but they didn't want to go on medication, and often medication isn't like the first kind of course of action that's recommended. So he gave her a fitness prescription, essentially, and was like, hey, I want you to work out 2 hours a day, every day for a month. And so that's extreme, not sustainable. But I'm curious, when I heard about that, she told me directly, and I was like, I wonder if that's becoming the norm at all, or if you're seeing that in your work.
I mean, the best part about this moment in time is that, CBT teaches us to reframe our thinking. And one of the reasons that mental health is a very inaccessible but huge market is because of this huge stigma that persists, right? It makes you think you're weak, this, that. But just to your point, I mean, I don't know any successful people who have not been through a whole bunch of shit. Like, if you see a lot, like, seriously, if you see somebody at the top, they have had many deep nights of the soul. They might have had a divorce or two. They've probably punched a cop. Like, I mean, or a police horse, just like they've had some rowdy times. And I'm a therapist, and I was NYC, so I can verify that every single founder that I've met or worked with either has ADD, OCD, or bipolar disorder. And so but in a good way, right? Like, I think I'm not scared of that stuff, so I think they're good and necessary qualities. Like, when you talk about pain tolerance, most entrepreneurs have a really high risk tolerance, For most people, the idea of just kind of being like, oh my God, I'm going to be broke for, 6 to 5, I have to ask people for money, I'm going to speak in front of people, just makes them so uncomfortable that the idea is intolerable. So it's actually a good thing if you have kind of feel things very deeply, right? Because the same person who has a bipolar or manic episode could also be described as a creative genius if they channel it the right way. So to your question, yes, I don't think that every answer is medication. First of all, there's like a bajillion side effects for every single medication out there. And it takes a long time to find the right dosage. So something that's good, no matter what, if you're going through a really tough time, because sometimes they're just episodic depression. And again, there's really big difference between having true clinical depression, where it's like you can't get out of bed for months, and just circumstantial depression, when, shit ain't going right, your wife is mad, your kids, that would be normal for you to experience depression. So if you're having a really tough day, one, get some more sleep. You want to stay in bed for a reason. Like, just like your muscles get tired, your mind gets tired. Like, it's exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting, and honor that. I always tell people every emotion deserves equal respect. And our body is the only thing that doesn't lie. Our minds lie to us all the time. Our hearts lie to us all the time. We have all stayed in a relationship with a fuck boy or a fuck girl for way too long because our hearts were lying to us. So, but your body won't lie to you. So seriously, one of my therapists told me, get 9 hours of sleep, and it changed everything. I don't know why we're on this, 15 hours a day. That shit is not sustainable, The world needs you at your best, and your company needs you at your best. So get enough sleep, one. Two, spend time with your friends. It's just an app. It's not worth losing your friends or your man or, making your mother cry. It's just an app, When my company closed, my dad still thinks I just did something with computers. He loves me anyway, and that is what helped kind of the mourning period be shortened. So. And also spend time outside. I know we had a very extended winter, but vitamin D is really good for you. And if it's still not enough, before psychotropic medication, I would still recommend smoking weed first. I would still recommend St. John's wort, which is a natural antidepressant, which has had strong effects for mild to moderate depression, as does omega-3 oils, which actually works with schizophrenics, so extreme mood disorders. But there's lots of, just make it more manageable, right? I mean, try everything, make it work for you. So yeah, before you get on drugs. And also microdosing is really hot right now. Acid is finally legal or acceptable.
MDMA.
That was an interesting spectrum. I hadn't heard that.
I mean, I don't know. I'm self-snitching up here, but just try
MDMA
everything.
has made really huge progress for the treatment of PTSD so far. There's MAPS, the organization in California. They're running a lot of clinical trials. So soon, the hope is MDMA will just be legal everywhere, especially for mental health.
Yeah.
So I think it would be cool to hear about in terms of selecting a therapist, the process that you've gone through. It seems like you've had a lot of moves, so you may have thought about that process. If you would be willing to share, I think it would be cool to hear.
Yeah, it's generally not what you think. And so there's been studies, there's different modalities of therapy. So CBT that I mentioned earlier, cognitive behavioral therapy is one of them. There's somatic, there's art therapy, there's psychodynamic, there's all these different types. There's been studies that have shown the modality of treatment actually doesn't matter as much. It's just like dating. It's about the relationship. But the problem is when you go online and you're looking at these directories of people, similar to Tinder, it's really hard to tell if there's going to be an emotional fit when you're just looking at someone's profile online. So for me, I just try people in person, and I invest that time to kind of speed dating therapists. So I go and do 30-minute trial sessions with people, and that's what we make accessible to everybody as well, until I feel like this person gets me. But in our data, something that we've also seen is people like to feel like the person is a peer, and so it's a little bit esoteric right now, but one thing that we see, if they have similar levels of like academic achievement, or if they went to similar schools, or if they're from similar areas. So like an example, we saw someone that's from the Midwest. We matched with a therapist also from the Midwest. And they're just, oh, that person gets me because they get my family values, they get my cultural values. So there's just a lot of nuance. And that's why it's just important to try different ones. So if you have a bad experience the first time, like definitely keep trying. It is like going on a date a little bit.
What about you? What's your practice for? Are you more play close to your chest, or are you just more open and vulnerable?
I would say I use my mother. And
User.
I also city bike and walk everywhere I go, unless it's snowing where you can't do either, or pouring rain. But every time I walk anywhere, I get on the phone with my mom, and she's sort of my free therapist. I'm sure she doesn't always enjoy that, but but I do follow your advice, which I think is interesting. In the summer in New York City, there's so many free ways to find fitness, and I always try to find outdoor fitness. Like this morning, I worked out on the Hudson River Park, and it's so enjoyable and beautiful. Like New York's pretty, you know. Like So if you're outside working out on the waterfront, it's just even better.
Well, I want to make sure that we open it up to the audience, make this an interactive event, because I'm sure you'll have questions about the journey. This is a safe space, so if you have any questions, now's the time. Hey.
I can have a comment. So, Alexa, you were talking about how you really like ClassPass and you really like the community aspect of it, and that you see that relationships are really important when you try to find a therapist. That kind of sounds really like group therapy would be really valuable because you're doing both of those things. You have community and you're connected with people who have similar values to you or similar situations to you, and
Well, it's not always the same people in group therapy, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a comment back to that. So we haven't yet started
We're
integrating.
insing.
Yeah, we haven't started integrating group therapy into our mental health gym experiences yet. But what is really important is we do workshops because we want to keep the friction low. Often people aren't yet ready to publicly self-identify as, hey, I'm anxious, I'm going to join this anxiety group therapy session. But what we do find people really enjoy is we do workshops on, here's how to learn about your cognitive bias, or here's how to learn about cognitive distortions, or here's how to differentiate between good stress and bad stress. And those workshops are very interactive, so people are able to meet other people that are similar to them and are taking care of their mental health, which helps people and it signals people like, hey, I'm not alone in this. And then we pair those workshops with therapy before and after the workshop. So then people are like going in and out of the session. They're like, oh, interesting. Like I was just in a workshop with that person. They're going to a therapy session. So I was like, maybe I should try therapy too. So the workshop piece is really, really important. I think I personally haven't tried group therapy, but that's something that I can totally see us integrating into the experience in the future.
Group therapy is awesome. Unfortunately, it's declining in practice because you really have to know who you are. But it works a lot with shared experience like eating disorders, erectile dysfunction, alcoholism, those things that might be shameful. That, like to your point, only people who can get it. Not like even an expert won't get it as much as somebody who's actually been through it. But there's also general ones, and those are brilliant for self-awareness because it mimics how you are in real life. Like there's always a quiet person who kind of like hangs back. There's always someone who talks too much, and a group moderator. Anyways, if you can look it up, I mean, it's very cool if you want to know yourself better. That self-discovery journey.
No, I just wanted to echo what Lori was saying about getting in nature. This not even a small detail. Like especially as founders who are we're like typing all day, like looking at a screen, like just truly getting yourself out in nature can reframe your perspective. And I think if you haven't slept, like you mentioned before, like sleep I think is a huge deal. If you haven't slept or taken a walk in more than a month, maybe go do that. It's like a real small tactical thing that I think is a big deal. And for me personally, I come from a faith background, and so that was also a thing. Like I realized for me to be my authentic self, I needed to be exposed and reading the Bible for me, or going in that experience. And looking back at what are the things that I used to do, like having a long-term memory that brought back health, which was walking, or call a friend. I had friends, there's people like me. It's fine. I should just talk to them and keeping an inventory of when I'm really low, have I walked outside? Have I called somebody? Have I, or just like gone and sit in a different environment? Don't look at my computer screen so much. And I think this life can be so consuming. Like there's my company, like if I wanted to spend every waking moment on my company, I could always find a task. And so I think being intentional about saying like, this is time where I need this, because one of my investors said this to me, and it was actually I usually get crappy advice from my investors, but not all the time. And his thing was, he told me that my mental health was actually an asset for the company. And he said, I couldn't be a good steward in my company if I let my mental health get bankrupt. And that like all the things in my output and the quality of my decisions and all of that, like I have to first think that like, people who don't have mental health are not great executives, right? And like if I want to be a truly great executive, I have to maintain that
I'd actually
asset.
disagree with that. We have some true sociopaths killing it. I mean,
Yeah, well-
absolutely killing it in the valley. So, and they actually have mood and personality disorders.
Yeah.
Wait, that's it. Wait, we have one more question. Okay, just because
Yeah, please.
Thanks for talking about this, such important stuff. I'm going to see if I can sort of bring it together with one of the main themes of the conference, which is like, how can we make sustaining companies and grow things in more sort of organic and self-directed ways? That has a lot to do with ambition and like how big a thing you want to make, how big a dent in the universe you want to make. A lot of mental health is about the values that you carry around in your life, that you apply to your business, to your family, to your personal life. Is this something that you guys, maybe there's just some commentary on like how big and crazy ambitious a company you want to build versus like medium is beautiful kind of thing, and how that might tie into your mental health and your values and your goals in life.
That's a great question. So let's real quick go down the line just to keep us on time. Start down there.
Okay, if we do start down here. So my thing is, I don't actually believe that those things have to be in conflict. I think it's a false dichotomy to imagine that you, in order to achieve something great, have to do that from a place of not being healthy. And so, and in order to do that, that means you actually have to prioritize, like put health in its right place. And I've played on both sides of that line. And I actually find that when I was not healthy, I am better. Like I have transformed into a better executive now that I focus on health over when I was just thought I was going after this huge vision at the cost of these other things. So I think it's a false dichotomy.
Yeah, I agree. Mental health costs employers, some of the biggest companies, $200 billion a year in lost productivity, in turnover, in something called present absenteeism. So that's when you're working hard, you're showing up to work, but you're not mentally all there, and so you're not doing your best work. And so I think the best companies of the future and the most successful ones will be ones that recognize that and put the mental health of their employees first. And as a result, those employees will be healthier, they'll be happier, they'll be more productive. And I think we can talk about tactics and like how companies can do that. But at a high level, yeah, you can totally be successful and you will be successful because a company cares about the mental health of founders and the employees.
I mean, I totally agree with Alexa, and I'm sort of a sole founder for the most part. I work by myself a lot, and I can be very lonely, but I do think that I don't do anything halfway, and because I got into fitness, it's helped me succeed in a massive way.
And I would say what I like about the mental health, the whole spectrum, is the delusion. It could be anything. Like I said, your mind and how you feel sometimes isn't real. So dream as big as you can. Like everybody who's made it had to be a little bit delusional, right? They had to see something that nobody else saw and nobody else believed in, and commit to it, like despite all the odds, for 5 to 7 years. That's how the average length of success. So also, I would remember that even if just have your North Star, because it's really easy to get distracted by the bullshit. It's really easy to get dragged down to the granular thing. But if you just have one North Star and always remember why you started, or stay committed to it, and just also as far as managing your mood, like that anxiety and that self-doubt and stuff, it's only useful to a certain point, and you can't take it with you where you're going, so just always stay focused on making it work. Well, thank you so much. That's a wrap for us. Have a good conference. This is the difference.